The first signs of life from before this big eruption had been found, and the search was on to reveal proof of a culture that would link the island to the great civilizations of Crete and Atlantis. The answer was unearthed in 1966 by an American archaeologist named James Mavor Jr. Mavor assembled a team to search the islands for signs of ancient artifacts. They began their dig on the southern tip of the island, in the tiny village of Akrotiri. In their very first trench, they struck gold. They unearthed an ancient wall buried under 30 feet of volcanic rock. As they dug deeper, the wall became a house, and the trench revealed a cobbled street. At their very first attempt, Mavor's team had discovered an extraordinary town, perfectly preserved in the ash of a volcanic eruption.
We are talking about a brilliant culture, brilliant civilization with a very advanced technology in all ways, and especially building technology.
The discovery was hailed as one of the most important finds in classical archaeology. The town remained substantially intact. Just like the city of Pompeii in Italy, volcanic ash had filled the city and sealed it from the elements. Its contents had been preserved for more than 30 centuries. The huge task of uncovering the town continues today. With every inch of ash that is removed, new clues to the civilization that was here are revealed. And just as described in the legend of Atlantis, we see engineering skills that were sophisticated way beyond their time.
When I first came to Akrotiri, I was expecting something rather simple. But then I realized that this town was made of multi-story buildings. And when we are talking about multi-story, we are talking about 2- and 3-story buildings. And at some point, I realized that I was walking on the 3rd floor of a building that had been constructed 3,500 years ago. That was really extremely impressive.
Akrotiri is a truly extraordinary find. It is a city arranged with a structured assembly of interconnecting roads and paths, the earliest form of organized town planning ever discovered, and centuries more advanced than anything that has ever been seen before from this period. Archaeologists have mapped every inch of the town, and from their data, our team have built computer-generated models. You are now traveling down the streets and interacting with the buildings of a sophisticated community that was destroyed at the height of its power thousands of years ago. Just as we have seen in the Palace of Knossos, at Akrotiri there are complex multi-story buildings constructed of wood and stone. And the plumbing was even more elaborate. Fresh running water fed each house, and a sewerage system ran throughout the entire town.
There is a perfect sewage system running under the streets, and these are connected to lavatories on the upper floors of the buildings.
Not for at least 1,000 years would it become commonplace to find bathrooms inside people's homes.
The discovery of this lavatory, as you can imagine, is truly very important. If you just stop to think, it took ages, hundreds of years to have lavatories within a house.
It was not just the discovery of a toilet that so amazed the engineers, but also its ingenious design. The waste fell through a clay pipe to a chamber below, where water from the town drains flushed it into a cesspit. The pipes interconnected in such a way that a siphon effect was formed, drawing foul smells down the pipes and away from the lavatory. The design was centuries ahead of its time. This sophisticated system of water management matches up to the stories of Atlantis, in which Plato wrote of ancient towns equipped with hot and cold running water. But there was one crucial discovery at Akrotiri that lent new credibility to the idea that Santorini was the island at the center of Atlantis. a fresco was unearthed that revealed an image of life on the island 3,500 years ago.
Can we be so lucky as to have a snapshot of what this landscape looked like? Here is the peninsula, this is Akrotiri Peninsula. It shows a profile of the island, 1, 2, 3 peaks. Going down farther, we see a waterway that surrounds a central island, a fairly large island, and on that island, a city. They were living on the central island. That central island was a developing volcano.
This idea of a central island port encircled with layer upon layer of buildings fits perfectly Plato's description of the island city of Atlantis. A city that at the height of its power was blown to bits in a devastating eruption. Seismologists are now following a trail of clues that lead from Santorini back to the palaces of Crete. They will reveal the full extent of the horrific disaster that tore Santorini apart and led to the destruction of an entire civilization. Since the discovery of the palace at Knossos in 1900, archaeologists have expanded their search. Today, a network of ancient towns and palaces has been revealed across the length and breadth of Crete. What all these sites have in common is that they were destroyed in the middle of the 2nd millennium BC by a series of terrible disasters. According to the Greek philosopher Plato, Atlantis too was destroyed in a single day and night. The land was swallowed by the sea. 100 miles north of Crete on Santorini, Floyd McCoy has been gathering data to determine if the magnitude of the eruption that happened here in 1500 BC was enough to cause the devastation of Crete. What he has discovered is beyond all expectations.
So how big was this eruption? It was huge. How do we determine this is by how much material is blown out during the eruption. And the more we look, the more we find. There are huge, thick deposits of this ash and pumice on the seafloor that surrounds this island. It's been found down to the Nile Delta. It's been found up in the Black Sea. When we take all of this material and calculate the volume of it, we come out with an eruption that is perhaps 10 times Krakatoa in 1883.
Because Krakatoa exploded in the late 19th century, we have comprehensive records of the eruption, and the details are spine-chilling. The eruption ejected more than 6 cubic miles of rock, ash, and pumice into the atmosphere, killing 36,400 people. But it would have been dwarfed by the Santorini eruption.
It was enormous, and it occurred right in the middle of a flourishing civilization. Now things got nasty. In this eruption, things got terribly violent, and the mixture of water with this magma produced what we call pyroclastic surges and flows. As they swept across the landscape, they destroyed everything that had not been buried in this pumice.
At the heart of this civilization in Akrotiri, archaeologists have found signs that the residents were preparing to leave. Belongings were piled up outside houses, and beds were found pulled out into the streets. Sadly, for the few who took to the sea to head for Crete and the shelter of the palaces of Knossos, escape was no guarantee of survival. Because the settlements of Crete would be devastated, not by the ash and pumice that was raining down on Santorini, but by the next, even more devastating phase of the eruption.
Every pyroclastic flow that entered the ocean also pushed the ocean aside. When you push the ocean aside, tsunami.
Our investigators have turned to the experts at the National Observatory in Athens for proof of what happened. Using the very latest investigative techniques, they have discovered evidence of a killer tsunami.
Because of this new field of science, we have been able to discover a number of about 10 distinct tsunami events. So there is no doubt today that this very big tsunami event really existed and possibly contributed to the collapse of the Minoan civilization.